Hello Rebrand gang, and welcome to episode 26 of Rebrand Everything. Last week I put up a post on Instagram with an idea for a video where we take terrible fonts and try to make good or at least okay logos. And as you can see, the results came back strongly in favour of giving it a go. So here it is. So for the research stage, I typed in Comic Sans logos into Google. I thought that would be a pretty good place to start. And on Google Images, I saw loads of famous logos that have been rebuilt using Comic Sans. And it's just pretty funny. And there's some pretty weird stuff there, as you can see. I also looked at the Comic Sans font page on an actual shop. So if you was going to buy it, how they displayed it there. I was expecting to see it kind of in its natural habitat. So on a comic book, showing it in its best light and in its actual use case. But instead it was just shown in plain form, which was a little bit weird. When I was researching this, I hadn't seen Comic Sans for a little while, and I was just surprised at how ugly it actually is. It's you can't really remember how hideous it actually looks until you see it again. I think the key reason that Comic Sans has got a bad name for itself is that because it's so accessible, it's on pretty much every single computer around. People use it in inappropriate situations just because it's there and it looks a little bit more fun than Arial. But when it's used in staff rooms and stuff like that, it's just not right, and I think that's why it's got such a bad name for itself. So going into the sketching stage, I had a few ideas in my head, one of which was to create a logo that was taking the font back to the situation it was built for. So returning to that comic book style to make something that looks like it was used for its original purpose and it just looks natural. The two graphics that popped into my head when I was thinking of comic books were speech bubbles and thinking bubbles, and then the power graphic that happens on an impact in a Batman comic or something like that. They were the two things that popped into my mind immediately. Another route that I wanted to take was to just adjust the spacing of the text so that it doesn't look like standard Comic Sans, because in the use cases that have given it a bad reputation, people just kind of start a Word document, change it to Comic Sans and then start typing. So I was thinking if I track it out or do something special with the letter spacing and sizing, something that the average person wouldn't do, I might be able to try and hide the fact it's Comic Sans. As this logo relies so heavily on a font, I found it hard to visualise just how bad these logos would look when we were using Comic Sans, so I moved pretty quickly into Illustrator for this rather than just keep writing down my ideas on the paper.
This is a stupid idea for a video. I don't know what I'm doing with my life.
Even with the best will in the world, this video is probably not going to be my best ever work, but still press like if you enjoy it, and be sure to check out my older videos if this is the first video you've seen from me.
1.
So option 1 was going to be trying to put the font inside its natural environment, so hopefully it doesn't look so ugly and out of place as its normal uses. The comic book style was kind of what it was meant for, so it makes sense to use it within something that's got that comic book vibe. I drew the main bubble, and then to create the drop down part that links it to the mouth, I used the shape builder tool to cut away the parts I didn't want from the two overlapping circles, and just used a rectangle on the top just to cut that to a sharp edge, and then overlaid that, and then just used the Pathfinder to combine the two shapes. Then when I was putting the text in, I played around with the tracking a little bit, which kind of felt like I was polishing a turd, but I thought it was worth doing. And then to apply a little bit more contrast between the word comic and the word sans, I actually put a little white stroke on the word sans just to make a makeshift light version of the font, and that's just giving it that little bit more contrast between the two words.
2.
So another comic style design that I could think of were them impact bursts that they use. Comes up on the screen like pow or bam and stuff like that. So I tried drawing out a star. Again, while you're still holding the mouse down, you can press the up and down arrows and it will change the amount of points on that. And then I curved the inside edges just by grabbing all the inside edges and then just using the dynamic corners or whatever it's called, the live corners in Illustrator. I grabbed some of these comic bursts off of Google as a reference to see how they stylize them. And then I realised that the font wasn't actually even anything close to Comic Sans, so it kind of stopped my idea dead a little bit, because it was just going to look like one of them joke logos that we saw on Google Images earlier where someone's changed the font out, so I didn't really like where that was going. So instead of making an actual impact burst, I just thought maybe I could use the shape to create a nice, neater looking icon, just to hint at the comic book vibe rather than going all in on it.
3.
So for option 3, I wanted to make something a lot more simple and a lot more iconic, and kind of combining a more modern style with this hideous font. So I started out with squares just to sort of symbolise a super basic comic strip, like, you know, normally it's just squares going across the page that you kind of read along. So I thought 4 squares would be quite nice. I tried staggering them as well just to give it that little bit more interest, but it started looking like a Tetris block and also looked a little bit sharp and angular, which didn't fit well with the font. So to make it fit a bit better with the font, I rounded off the corners, neatened everything up again just so we got this nice little icon. Then I used like an outer block with a secondary colour on the background and just sort of made that look a little bit smoother. Just chose 2 kind of modern corporate colours just to sort of mask the fact that it's Comic Sans. I mean, it hasn't worked completely because it still says Comic Sans and it's still that awful font, but kind of kerned it and tracked it quite tight so it looks a little bit different to how you just type it out when you're in Microsoft Word. 4. In the sketching stage, I had drawn out an idea where I cut the letters at sort of like an edgy angle, try and make a sharp and serious which would contrast with the curvy, horrible text. When I did this and I sort of spent a little bit of time making an icon, I thought it just looked like a capital G, but still not a very nice one. So I had to change the plan on the go. I thought maybe incorporate the blocks again as a loose symbol of a comic strip. And I made the text small and then I tracked it out really wide in the hope that it would hide them horrible Comic Sans letter shapes, and I just thought no one ever normally pays attention to the tracking and kerning when they're typing in Comic Sans, so I thought by adjusting this quite dramatically it might just hide the fact it's Comic Sans a little bit. I'm not sure if it's worked or not. My basic thinking was that the further I took this font from the standard, the better. And actually just looking at this logo again now, it actually is reminding me, it almost looks like a parody of the Cartoon Network logo, which I guess actually isn't such a bad thing. 5. So for option 5, I wanted to include some of them half-tone dot effects to give it that retro printed comic book style. In the effect menu in Illustrator, there's an option called Pixelate, which allows you to do this effect under the color halftone. So you make a gradient and then you choose that effect, fiddle around with the settings, and it does give you a perfect like halftone dots effect, which is really cool. And actually you can make that vector by just doing a single channel, by just doing like the black channel for example. You can make that vector and image trace it, and it actually comes out as perfect circles, which is a good little tip which I didn't actually know. I thought it would have made a horrible live trace with, you know, when you've got loads of points in the circle, but it makes it really clean and really good. But if you were going to do that and you wanted to use multiple colours, do separate channels at a time and then colour them up after you've vectored them, otherwise the image trace doesn't understand the overlapping colours so well. I like the dark blue in the centre with the magenta and cyan dots colour coming out from the middle, giving it that retro CMYK look. It's definitely given it that comic book style. It's a little bit complicated for my usual style of logos, but I did think that it fitted the theme well enough that I could let it slide on this logo. I think this might be the worst idea yet. It is incredibly difficult designing logos when you can't change the font. It's just almost my natural reaction to jump into that character palette and start changing it. Just that is how I start a lot of my logo ideas and stuff. So then before I show you them final options, I just wanted to remind you to vote in the poll. You click the little I button up here, options will come up, vote for your favourite, then head straight down to the comments and let me know why that was your favourite and what you would have done differently, if anything. If you want to help the channel out, then press like on this video, and if you want videos like this every single week, press subscribe and put the bell on to get notifications every time I upload. If you would like to submit a rebrand for me to do in the future, visit rebrandeverything.com and fill out the form on there, and I will add it to my ever-growing list of rebrands to do soon. Okay then, Rebrand gang, here are our final options.